Good morning and welcome to a very special edition of Santos on Sports. Along with my partner Chris, I am Paul. We're happy to be brought to you by Scotty's Pub, Citywide Glass, Lakeville Athletic Club, and attorney John Seed. Our very special guest today is someone who has just been a fantastic sports writer at the Herald, primarily focusing on the Patriots since 2007, has been on the staff since 1984. Let me make sure I say this correctly. Karen Guregian.
Hard G's, but people call me a lot of different things. So,
well, thank you very much for doing this today. And I did want to mention too, you're in the Chelmsford High School Hall of Fame, so that's also a very nice accomplishment.
Yeah, I guess it gives me some credential to cover sports.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Patriots. It's been kind of a different kind of a year. I mean, the fans, the Boaston talk shows, they're just all over Bill Belichick about this change in offense. It felt like last year, they got to the playoffs with the offense that they had, the style of offense that they had. Mac Jones, a good year under his belt and a good system, 10-7. People were thinking, okay, this year it's going to be a year where there's going to be a lot of growth and all that. Why in the world would they have to change it all around?
To make it simpler. I'll go backwards before I go forwards. The Patriots offense, as we know it, started way back, even before Charlie Weiss took over. It was like the Ron Earhart days. And Charlie Weiss, who came in, was Bill Belichick's offensive coordinator to start in 2000, implemented his part of it. And it's kind of been adopted and, fixed and changed over the years, still with the same base. But it's the minute Brady took over, it sort of got more complex and more complicated, and largely because he's a pretty smart quarterback. And so by the time, Josh McDaniels took over several times, the language became very complicated. What you had to do in the offense, if you weren't the quarterback, whether you were tight end, receiver, that was also pretty complex. Wasn't something like run to point A or run to point B. I mean, it was pretty complex, and some people just didn't ever get it. So with Josh McDaniels leaving and taking quite a few of the offensive coaches with him who understood the offense, I think Coach Belichick decided he needed to simplify the terms. And since he has nobody now who's really coached offense before, Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, it was too hard. Put it this way, it was too hard for them to teach. So that's why I think in part they changed it. Also because I think Bill Belichick has long been a fan of the Shanahan style offense. So I think, to make a very long story short, they basically did it because they don't have a coaching staff who knew how to coach it.
Very interesting, Karen. And that being said, the other night we saw play calls from Patricia and we saw play calls from Judge, which is kind of unfamiliar territory pretty much in the NFL. It's almost like an offensive coordinator tryout during a preseason game. Are you surprised Bill didn't find maybe somebody else that would be able to handle this complicated offense that they had run, or at the same time saying, well, I got, some real base with Patricia and Judge. I know them well. I'll bring them in and I'll calm it down. But I thought it was very surprising to see almost like a tryout for two offensive coordinators.
Yeah, well, I think Bill's seeing who's going to do it best so he doesn't have to do it, I think. Right. Yeah. But I mean, ultimately, it stuns me that he didn't bring in a legitimate offensive coordinator or some kind of guru work with his prize. I mean,
Sure.
Mac Jones is their prize. He's
That's correct.
the guy. He's the guy who's supposed to deliver them, and he stuck them with, two failed head coaches who never coached offense. Now, it makes no sense to us. I'm sure it makes a lot of sense to Belichick because, as you said, he trusts these guys. He trusts Patricia implicitly. He trusts Judge. And just because they're failed head coaches doesn't mean they can't coach a position or run an offense. That being said, the other part to this equation, I think, too, is Bill doesn't have to pay them. As long as they don't have a title like coordinator or whatever, their former teams are still paying them. So Detroit is paying Matt Patricia, and New York is paying Joe Judge's salary. The Patriots aren't.
Wow.
Well, as I said, we're fans of yours, Karen, and myself, sports junkies like Chris and myself. We love to watch those post-game press conferences. And one of the things that we've discovered over the years is that you have a rapport with Bill Belichick, and you did so with Tom Brady. In fact, I got a kick out of the fact that when Tom came back and Tampa Bay played that game against New England, I saw that little smile on Tom's face when he called on you. And, there's a lot of times where, there's contentiousness between, the media and, Bill Belichick can be grumpy with the media and stuff like that. And, Tom, not so much. But building those relationships, even not only with just Tom and Bill, but with other players. How do you do that? How did you end up kind of being on the good side of the grumpy Belichick and, getting really that connection with Tom Brady? Because I can tell, I think he likes you too. You know what I mean? So how did you accomplish all that?
Well, first off, I don't totally avoid the grumpy side of Bill Belichick. So you must have saw it on a good day because he's typically grumpy with the media every day. So as for Tom, I mean, it was just, I was probably a familiar face, and I've been there a long time. And I'd also, take time to chat with him at his locker, not necessarily about football, talk about his kids, and you build that kind of rapport with these athletes seeing you day to day to day. And, I think it's important if you want to establish a relationship, not to come in there with your notebook and recorder every 2 minutes and, take a step back and actually have a discussion with the guy. And Tom and I have had quite a few over the years. So I think that was part of it, and part of the fact that I've probably been there longer than most people.
And so now this year, Karen, with training camp and obviously the first preseason game, I'm sure you're starting to work on that repertoire with certain players now. And in this training camp, and even maybe the preseason game, has there been something that you've seen that as a standout, maybe a player, a coach, something that you're saying, wow, that was pretty intriguing. I need to get involved in that, or talk to this person, or see that, or someone standing out on the field? Because, we're not able to see all the training camp and everything. And just going by what we hear, the offense hasn't been that good, and, what's been going on. So what have you seen so far with this team that you kind of like and look forward to the season coming up?
Well, I think offensively, if they ever get their act together with this new offensive zone scheme and make that work or click, I think offensively they should be fine. They don't have a lot of top tier talent, but they do have some talent. And actually, the person or player that I'm actually most interested right now is Tyquan Thornton, their second round draft pick and wide receiver. And the reason for that is, obviously he's a second round pick. Obviously, the Patriots haven't had the best luck drafting receivers. but this kid out of Baylor has something that nobody else has from their receiver group, and that's speed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has speed and then some. He was clocked 4.28 in the 40-yard dash, and in order to kind of open things up on the inside where the Patriots like to roam and conduct their offense,
Yeah.
you got to have that outside guy that teams fear,
Mm-hmm.
because he'll not only take his coverage, but a safety will have to stay back there because he's a threat to beat the coverage. So we weren't sure. He's like a real spindly, skinny kind of kid. And, it's one thing for them to succeed in college. But then you get to the pros where you have press coverage at the line and you're getting beaten up at the line before you even take a step.
Yep.
So it's been interesting to watch and see if he's able to hold up to the, let's just say, physicalness of the NFL.
Yep.
And watching him the other night, he held his own. I mean, I think he's sneaky when it comes to power and stuff like that. He was blocking people with no problem. He fought off being held for the touchdown he scored. So I think he's going to be someone who's interesting to watch, and it'll be interesting to see how much, if at all, the Patriots incorporate him in the offense.
Well, not only him, of course. I was impressed by him as you were the other night, especially with that speed, but some of the other additions they made in the offseason. But I'm looking at all that, and then I'm looking at that against the Patriots' schedule. The schedule looks like it's really tough, one contender after another. And, last year the Patriots made the playoffs. We thought maybe they would be a playoff contender. They did get into the playoffs with that 10-7 record. And then we were thinking this year, well, maybe they could be a playoff contender again. But then I'm thinking the new offense, bringing in those two people, as we said, Patricia and Judge, trying to change the offense, even with the additions that they made, the schedule that they have. What do you think about this schedule? And, I've heard people say, I think they're going to go 5-12. I've heard other people say, yeah, but if they win a lot of those games, maybe they are a playoff contender. What about that schedule? And what about, changing the offense and, comparing that to that schedule? That's a tough schedule. You think they can make the playoffs?
Well, if I were a betting person, which I'm not, I wouldn't bet on them making it. The schedule's top heavy, I think, and bottom heavy.
Yep.
And they have a little breathing room in the middle, and obviously it's helpful that they're not going to have to face Deshaun Watson. But the two games they start right off on the road in Miami, which is always like a house of horrors for them. And then in Pittsburgh, no, Ben Roethlisberger is not there anymore, but Pittsburgh has a very good defense, and playing there, it's going to be tough for them to split. And then you come home against the Ravens, a great team. You go to Green Bay, so it's hard. It's hard to see them. Let's say if they break even at 2-2, then I'd say they have a fighting chance. I just don't see them breaking even at 2-2 to start, even though they started 1-3 last year. And then they went on that stretch of winning 7 in a row. But then they completely petered out at the end. So it's tough. And as you said, adapting and adjusting to a new offense, a new scheme, new coordinators, on and on and on and on, and having a defense which technically on paper hasn't really improved. The cornerback room still is questionable. And with it being such an offense-driven league, they're going to have to show me that they can stop Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo didn't punt the last 2 times they played. So
Mhm.
If they can make Buffalo punt, then maybe I'll give them a chance. But I have to see it first.
Well, I think you said it there, Karen. The first 4 games look like the way to go for the Patriots if they make any kind of move, and they got to start off fast. And Bill's always known to advance his team as the season goes on. He makes them better as the year goes on. But I think the first 4, with, as you said, at Miami, at Pittsburgh, come back with a Lamar Jackson, fresh and healthy, and then obviously at Green Bay. So if they split and make 2-2, that would be very impressive, I think, for Bill. It kind of gives them some way when they go Detroit and Cleveland and some other teams. So hopefully they can get off to a good start. And that leads to my question now is Mac Jones. This is year number 2. We've seen some guys in year number 2 have success. We've seen some guys in year number 2 go backwards. What have you seen from Mac Jones besides what we're hearing where he's shredded, he's on a diet, his arm strength is much better, he's throwing the ball more down the field, but yet at the same time getting away from this complex offense, kind of more simplifying it for him. How do you see him so far in year number 2? Are you liking what you see out of their go-to player in Mac Jones?
Yeah, I just want to digress for 1 second, and
Yep.
it sort of relates to Mac Jones too.
Sure.
The Patriots could have slow starts in the past, and
Yep.
they had, and they typically would pick up steam as the
Yes.
season went on.
Mhm.
But another big difference is they could get away with a 1-4 start, a 2-4 start, a 2-5 start. Why? Because of the guy they had at quarterback, Tom Brady.
True.
He had a way of kind of fixing all that was wrong ultimately with them. So just want to say that part.
Sure.
Mac, yes, he was very dedicated in the off season to improving, and that included, fixing his diet, getting stronger, and you can see him physically. He's kind of, for lack of a better word, he's kind of shed his baby fat.
Mhm.
he's
Yep.
so he's put on. I mean, he's trimmed down. Tried to add a little muscle, and he looks good. He looks fine throwing the football. The issue, I think the issue that he's having is he was fine with the old offense. He was smart enough to be able to pick it up.
Mhm.
And one of his strengths, the offense suited him because he's actually a Brady type quarterback in terms of, make a quick read, get rid of the ball fast. And he was able to read defenses, find the open guy, boom, boom, boom. And so he was the perfect quarterback for that old offense. And I'm sure he's probably scratching his head a little bit and saying, what, now we're dumbing it down and we're changing it. And, although a lot of elements of the new offense are similar to the one he ran in Alabama. Bottom line, I think Jones has a good enough skill set to also flourish in this type of offense. If you look at teams that have used it, Jimmy Garoppolo got San Francisco to the Super Bowl in that offense.
Mhm.
Aaron Rodgers is actually balked and kicked and screamed at first when they installed it with his new coach, but he's been an MVP every year since.
Mhm.
So it is a quarterback friendly offense.
Mhm.
So I think ultimately the problem is everybody else around the offensive lineman really have to grasp the scheme. And the problem is what we've been seeing at practices is, all these guys coming in free and just, a lot of disjointedness, which you would hope would be ironed out with more reps and more practice time.
Yeah, right.
Well, you alluded to it before. It is an offensive driven league. And as a result, we, the fans, like to talk about the offense like 80% of the time. The quarterback is bigger, stronger, leaner. That's all great stuff for Mac Jones. The wide receivers have another year under their belt. The tight ends, Hunter Henry had a good year. Bourne had a good year. They made some additions and stuff like that. But when Chris and I would talk about it, I always felt that it was the defense that let them down. There were games where, Mac Jones got them within to one touchdown, and then down the field, the other team came and like Niagara Falls, right? So again, and you alluded to too, how they couldn't force a punt against Buffalo. I don't care who the quarterback is. I don't care what kind of offense they install. If you can't stop anybody, you are going nowhere. So the defense scares the living daylights out of me. What say you, Karen?
Well, they can. It's funny. They were like a top 10 defense last year, if you can believe that. They just weren't a top 10 defense when they played the good offenses. So I think that they, took a lot of it had to do with, they thought, and obviously if you watched, speed of their speed of their linebacker group to start. And, they whittled away. I mean, look, Dante Hightower, Jamie Collins, Kyle Van Noy, in their day were terrific Patriots, terrific players. I can't say enough about Dante Hightower, but when they got older, they're all over 30. And, if you lose a step in this league, you're literally lost, especially in offense-driven league. And especially with, again, when they were in their prime, the league, it was different. It wasn't quite as let's throw the ball every down kind of situation. So, they were, turns out to be almost liabilities, not Van Noy as much, but because, Hightower was slower, guys were just flying by. The running backs especially were just flying right by him. And again, to compete defensively in this league now, you need to combat speed with speed. So they shed the older guys who were slow, and they've incorporated some, younger, faster types. So, again, we'll see how that works out. And the other thing is, for the secondary to have a chance, you have to have a pass rush. You have to be able to get to the quarterback. Yep. They did fine for the first half of the year because Matthew Judon was a wrecking ball. I mean, he was like a one-man force, a one-man pass rush. And then over the last 5 games, he was invisible. So was that because he got tired? Too much was on his plate? He was hurt? Who knows? But the problem was there wasn't somebody on the other side picking up the slack. So if, the Patriots, somebody outside of Barmore, Christian Barmore on the inside, Matthew Judon on the right side, you need the guy on the other side also, getting to the quarterback. And that will inevitably help the back end.
Yeah, and kind of finishing up, Karen, this is now 70 years old for Bill Belichick. If this is not a successful season and they don't make the playoffs, are you seeing some changes with Bill Belichick at being 70 and say, maybe it's time to, move on? Or do you see him sticking around a lot longer? Is it going to be like maybe whatever happens this season? How you see him now at 70, figuring out his coaching career coming to an end, or can you see it still lasting a little bit longer with New England?
Well, I'm not sure he's totally in control because there's a guy above him who's his boss, Robert Kraft, right? Who's expressed a disdain for, not winning playoff games. So, whether he would bring the hammer down on Belichick is something entirely different.
Right.
But he has stated that, he wanted to see things improve with their drafting.
Yep.
And also he wants to win in the playoffs. One and done is not, is not good enough, and especially since, what they've established here with 2 dynasties. That being said, it wouldn't be the easiest thing for Robert Kraft to fire the guy who won him 6 Super Bowls. So, and there's just this whole underlying, narrative of, can Bill win without Tom?
Yeah.
And I'm sure Bill thinks he can and wants to show that, because guess what? Tom has won without Bill. So, is Belichick quite as driven as he was when he was younger? I don't know. You'd have to sort of ask him that question. But, watching him at practice, he's been hugely invested in the offense. Whereas in the past, he was more on the defensive end because he didn't have to really worry about the offense because he had McDaniels there and Tom Brady there. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. Right. I think Belichick would like to leave on his own terms whenever that might be. But I would also say that Josh McDaniels might have hung around if he thought there was an end in sight with Belichick.
Right.
So I think Belichick still has a few more years left in him. Okay. And I think he also wants to establish things enough for the next succession or next, whoever takes over, to maybe keep his 2 sons on the staff.
Well, Karen, we really appreciate you taking time out to spend some time with us down here along the south coast of Massachusetts. I'm going to defer to Chris for a second here. Karen may be our top guest that we ever had. I mean, it's a close call between her and Tom Curran, but I don't know. I think we might give Karen a slight edge. Don't tell Curran.
Don't tell Curran that. No. Do not tell him that.
All right, Karen. Hey, keep up the great work. We are fans of yours. We really enjoy your questions at the press conferences and how you come across and your writing for the Herald and stuff like that. Yeah. So keep up the great work, and we'll see what happens this year. It should be a very fascinating Patriots season.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Chris. It was a pleasure to be on.
Karen, right. you got a record prediction for us before you go?
Yeah, let's see. I'll say 8 and 9.
8 and 9. Right. Okay, there you go, Paul. 8 and 9.
Right around the over under. Right?
And I think that's being positive for me after what I've seen.
All right, Karen. Have a great weekend. Thanks again.
Thanks, Karen, so much for coming on.
Take care, guys.
All right, Karen Guregian from the Boaston Herald. Wow, what a terrific guest she was. She just is so knowledgeable, gives you the inside scoop. All the questions about the rapport with Brady and Belichick, what she thought about the new offense, what she thinks about this season. Oh, what a just a torrential flood of knowledge coming from Karen. So that was actually a credit Chris Santos for tracking her down. Hey, that was quite a steal there, partner.
Well, Paul, you talked about it, and we've talked about this now when we've talked to Patriots, and you said they were not able to handle the Buffalo Bills, and she talked about we're not able to force a punt in 2 games against them. So you've been right on it. She was right on it. And then she talked about the word that I think is the new NFL, whether it's offense or defense, and it's speed, Paul. It's the word speed. You're talking about getting the right player in the right position and utilize their speed. And I think that was very important. She talked about it with the new wide receiver, what he offers in the speed in the offense to spread the defense back. Then she talked about how quick Judon was and how he was forcing things early in the season, and then he didn't have it midway or later on. And she talked about nobody else stepped up with their speed to really help out. It's going to be interesting in this defense that if they found something in some speed, as she talked about, to be really productive, even though she said they were a top 10 defense, even though you really didn't see it because you were concerned about, how well they did not handle Buffalo in that big game. But speed is very, very key now in today's NFL.
All right, looks like we left an S out there.
Oh yeah,
But you can
Santos.
still, you can still call Santos on
That's okay.
Sports.
Yeah, give us a
Let's
call
see.
now if anybody
There it
wants
is.
to at 774-762-6234. Talk about what we've asked Karen, what your thoughts of what Karen had to say. Love to hear from you, Patriot fans. And it's just around the corner, preseason. Talk about maybe what happened the other night. Maybe someone else you like that played well. She talked about the wide receiver from Baylor and what he showed. He did score a touchdown, and she thinks he's got a good chance to really be involved in the offense. So give us a call.
All right, and we did have a comment, and the comment was along the line of what you just were talking about a moment ago, that has anyone stood out in practice so far, and
Yep.
who do you think is poised to have a breakout season? She did like Thornton, the fast second-round pick, and, even on the defensive side, it's all about the speed in the league, and you got to have speed offensively, speed defensively to compete.
Yep.
So she definitely addressed that. A lot of the stuff that she talked about is stuff that you and I have raised on the podcast, so that was nice to hear that, some of the stuff that we've been wondering about, she addressed.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that I liked what she talked about at the beginning, because a lot of people are asking about Matt Patricia and Joe Judge and what is Bill doing. And she talked about why is he going with these two, and he didn't go out and get a offensive coordinator guru or somebody a little bit more, for that position to say, hey, this is what we've been doing. Can you handle this and continue this offense? Instead of, no, I'm going to go with Matt and I'm going to go with Joe. And now we're going to simplify things. We're going to bring it down. I'm going to have a tryout with my two offensive coordinators and then try to figure out as it goes. I thought that was kind of interesting. And I thought she thought the same thing. Like, why did he do that? But that's what he did. And that's how they're doing it.
All right, well, let's go to our phones. We have Butch on the line. Hello, you are on Santos on Sports.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Hi, how are you?
Morning, Butch.
Good, very good. Great guest. Very insightful. Love the way she articulated her answers.
Yep.
Just brings real credibility to the show. I thought she just did a wonderful job, and she didn't seem to have the axe to grind with the Patriots or Bill Belichick with the way he treats some of the media. She just seemed to rely on facts, is which really that's what I look for. I just want facts. I don't want anybody's opinion, unless we ask for it, of course. But great show. I thought the guest was outstanding. Good job, Chris, by having the foresight and forethought to reach out and see if you get her on. I think it brings a lot to the show.
Yeah, I like what, again, talking offense, talking defense, talking Bill, talking about what she does for the media. Mac Jones, obviously the player they're going to look for. She talked about the schedule. She gave us her insight of what she thought, they can be, what they can do, what they can't do, and what they need help in, and, who she liked. She just gave us a little bit of everything, and I think that's what Patriot fans want to hear going into the season, what to look for, and when they are losing, do they not have the speed? When they are winning, what do they do to simplify the offense? What has Mac been doing? Can he, stronger arm strength? All the things that I thought she was very knowledgeable on, and did a great job answering our questions.
I thought the really piece that I liked was the piece about Aaron Rodgers and some of the other offenses that use the same offense and have been very successful in their personal play with it and also as a team. You don't hear that in local sports on the radio. All you hear is criticism about they don't know what they're doing and Joe Judge and this. That's the first time I heard that, this isn't a new invention in a test tube. You know what I'm saying? This offense that they're installing or implementing now has been proven to be successful in the NFL. Very successful.
Yeah, and it was interesting because she talked about Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, I thought that was an outstanding point that, as much as it irks me sometimes, I listen to the radio a lot, and that's the first time that I've heard that, and that was, I thought, valuable information.
Well, one of the things I thought was interesting that we learned today, I thought, Chris and Butch, was that, I asked her the thing that the fans are asking is, last year, they were 10-7. Mac Jones seemed to get better. He was learning the offense and stuff like that. So we're thinking, wow, second year in that offense, he's stronger, he's bigger, he can throw the ball farther and all that. Why in the world are they changing it? And her point was that old Tom Brady offense that developed over 20 years, that got more and more complicated as it went along, that wasn't too difficult for Mac Jones because Mac Jones is very cerebral kind of a guy, he picks up things fast. He's a quick study, I mean, when I studied for the bar, I was a slow study, but I still got it done. But he's a quick study, but maybe not so much for the rest of the team. So I thought that was interesting that she thought that Mac Jones could handle it, but maybe many of the other players on the team that had come from other offenses that maybe, weren't as cerebral as Mac, maybe they were struggling a little bit. And that's why they had to go not only to this offense that was a little bit less complicated, but also Belichick likes it, and it has had success like in Green Bay, San Francisco, and some of these other places. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and without McDaniels, too, that, you're going to have to make adjustments because you don't have that, that reliable asset that can bridge the gap and that real, difficult or technical what's the word I'm looking for? That difficult offense, a real technical offense. You're going to have to make some changes. And the NFL has made some changes. Defenses have made some changes that, will force good coaches to react and make some changes as well. So, but that's the first time I've heard that, where this offense that they're implementing is not, brand new, and Belichick hasn't introduced it as something, that he's come up with. I thought that, I'm sure it has his flavor to it, and he's made some changes. But I thought that was a good point, that it's successful in the NFL and very successful for some teams. So that was comforting as a fan, especially if you listen to the negativity on from day to day on the Patriots' progress for this year. But I stand by what I say. What a very good guess. Very good guess. I was impressed.
All right. Do you have a prediction for this year, Butch?
Well, I really don't. But I think I'm leaning more with her. I'm hoping for 500 or better. Anything above 500, I'll be pleased. I really, I'd like to see him get in the playoffs, but I just don't know. Rebuilding is rebuilding, and with such a long streak of success, it's tough to keep it going year after year after year, and especially with losing McDaniels and some of the changes that they've been through. But so let's go 10-7.
10-7. No, you're not guaranteeing it, are you?
Oh, hell no.
Oh, hell no.
Hey, Butch, thank you very much for your always terrific contribution to our show, and we look forward to hearing from you again.
All right, fellas, keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
all right.
Butch.
Yeah, some good comments there. And there was a comment here, speaking of Mr. Guarantee, a fresh in from Chicago, but he indicated that Mark is on a train and he can't hear, but he has the Patriots 5-2 in the first 7 games. Is counting on a win in Miami, maybe 4-3. He's concerned about Mac's development with no Josh and no offensive coordinator, but he does think that the defense is going to be better because he does predict good things from the young, faster linebackers that Karen talked about. And he does predict that Buffalo will punt this year against the Patriots. So I have a very optimistic view for Mark.
Well, and that's great. And, this West Coast offense, and Rodgers and some of these other teams. And even she said Jimmy G led San Fran to a Super Bowl. So is it possible for Mac to do that? Sure, absolutely. Now, can the other players accept what's going on here and figure out? We've seen in the past Belichick bring some people in, like an Ocho Cinco, who couldn't understand the complicated offense of the New England Patriots. Now, maybe if it's simplifier, you can get away with some of that, getting some free agents in and so forth and so on. So what they have now and what they're trying to develop is something a little more simpler when you don't have the GOAT, obviously, under center, but yet you have someone smart enough to make the right reads, to do the simple things and structure an offense that's good for you, that can obviously put some points on the board. So, you don't have Tom anymore, and you're trying to figure out what's best for Mac. So if this is what it is, and you're saying, hey, we can do this with him, we're going to help him out even more. And I think that's what they maybe want to do in year 2, and keep him around as long as they can and keep him healthy. So they're trying to find a way. It hasn't looked maybe successful so far in preseason. According to reports, they've been struggling on the offense in preseason. So let's see if that can kind of pick it up. And then, of course, speed, big on both sides. And, Paul, they're going to need it definitely on the defense. So let's see who stands out and gets to the quarterback. And as Karen said, need to get somebody beside Judon. So let's see who's next in line to make that move on the defense.
And thanks to the comment that says that, wow, very informative show. Great guest with terrific insight. Yes, Karen was terrific. We really enjoyed speaking to her. And if you'd like to get in the last 15, 20 minutes or so, we are at 774-762-6234. You see at the bottom of the screen there. The thing that scares me is the lack of time, the lack of time that they have, Chris, to implement this. Now, there's a lot of back and forth. Well, Judge and Patricia maybe aren't the right people. Maybe they should have brought in somebody else, O'Brien or somebody like that. But this is the decision that he made. He's trying to save money. I don't know what the motivation is there. He's not paying these people much by calling them different names and so forth, as Karen had pointed out. Mm-hmm. But, if you had like 3 months or something like that between now and the beginning of the regular season to really get this thing, purring like a kitten, to try to fine tune it, polish it a little bit. I mean, the opening day, what is it, like a month from now or something? Like, they just don't have time, and that scares the daylights out of me. How's this thing going to be successful with that lack of time?
Well, you're professionals, Paul. You're not taking a high school team. You're not taking a junior team and trying to figure it out. You guys are professionals. I'm sure that a lot of their schemes and a lot of their new things people have seen before. It's now studying, adapting, and figuring out, hey, this is how we're going to run it. We're pros. We can get this done. And they got to be a unit, 11 guys working together, figuring out this simplified scheme on offense to say, hey, we're going to be okay. And we got a leader who's ready to show everybody in year 2 that he's ready to go. And Karen thought he was ready to go. So that's good to see. Now, as you just said, Matt, Joe, or whoever makes the right calls and the right decisions on this offense. And then, of course, you got to rely on Matt to make checkdowns. You got to rely on Matt to obviously change the play at the line. A lot of things happen, and of course, it's not a lot of time, but that's why you practice every day, and that's why you have preseason games to get it ready. And hopefully, you stay healthy along the way. I mean, last night I heard Zach Wilson got hurt for the Jets, which is their go-to quarterback. That's not good. But Mac's going to have to play, and every time you step on the field, you can get injured, unfortunately. But they got to get it done, and they got to get it done right away because, like you said, it's just around the corner.
Well, in that league, it all starts with a quarterback, and even though Mac is a young guy, they're looking for some maybe more leadership out of them, even though he's, dealing with players that have been in the league 10 years longer, but he's still going to take the bull by the horns as a quarterback. And he made that comment like, hey, I'm the quarterback. I know what doesn't. So that leads me to believe that, when he comes up to the line of scrimmage, obviously it's not just what the offensive coordinator calls, it's what the quarterback decides to do when he comes up to the line, because how often do we see the quarterback change the play? It seems like it happens a lot.
Sure. No, absolutely. And that's the kind of league that it is. Next thing you know, he sees something that, oh, wait a minute, they're going to be blitzing. If they blitz here, that's going to ruin this play. So now I got to call an audible. I got to check that. I got to make some moves here and I got to see it. And so that's why they think with his smarts and picking up that offense and figuring out, they're going to be just fine. So I thought he did a pretty good job last year. I really did. And people, they want instant success. And I'm like, man, it's his first year. And he went 10-7 to a playoff game. Give the kid some credit there. I mean, you got people expecting like Super Bowls in their first year, which is really hard. So Another year under his belt. Yeah, it's a new system, and diet, shredded down, arm strength, a lot going on, but seems to be in the right frame of mind. Let's hope it all works out for him.
Well, having been a coach and been around sports your whole life, I'm wondering about a question I'm going to ask you. I'm getting ready to watch that game the other night, and I'm thinking, all right, let's take a look at the new offense here, right? And the first play from scrimmage, Hoyer drops back and throws a 9-yard slant down the middle for a gain of, as I said, 9, right? So I'm thinking that looked a lot like the old offense, So my question is, just because they're working on the new offense, and it's the Shanahan offense and all this stuff, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're throwing in a scrap heap plays from the old offense that maybe had some success. Might we see a combination of a lot of the new stuff that they're working on now, but then when the season starts, they're still going to go back to last year and say, well, you know what? There's a percentage of plays in the old playbook that also worked pretty good last year. Maybe we'll mix those in as well. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a combination of things. And, Bill's always got his chart and he's circling what play he liked. Or, oh, wait a minute. I don't like this play. Puts an X on it and try to see what his offensive line is doing, how they're holding up. And the same thing that other teams are going to do the same. So, sure, I can see Bill thinking of some plays that they've had in the past and said, boy, I really like this. And now I got a guy maybe who can run that route better than what I've had in the past. So, he'll circle that, keep it in, talk to Matt, talk to Joe, figure out, hey, I want to add this in. I want to put this in. I don't think it's an entirely, new offense. I think it's just a matter of simplifying some things, but at the same time, getting the right personnel in when I'm going back to some of those complicated schemes.
Right. Okay. Still time to get in here. It's 774-762-6234. Boy, what a enjoyable guest that was, having Karen here. Chris reached out to Karen. She very nicely accepted the offer. And Chris and I have this running thing where we say, it doesn't hurt to ask, right? Just ask. You know what I mean? You can call the president of the United States, I guess, even if it's a 1 in a million shot, they might say yes. So, I mean, between, Tom Curran and Karen, and of course we had Peter Abraham, the Red Sox. He's agreed to come back, I believe, down the road. So we've had some really good fortune here.
Yeah, Andy Hart,
WEEI, and it's right.
Yep.
So we've had some good fortune, and we're thankful because, obviously up in the Boston area, I'm sure they get many requests. Perhaps they don't get as many as we think. Maybe people are thinking, they'll never do it, so they don't even bother trying, which Chris's idea is just ask them what's the worst thing that happen. They don't answer, right? Or they say no, or they can't do it or whatever. So it's really nice because we have a lot of big fans, of course, along the South Coast. We're all out there, Chris and I, along with the other thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of fans down here along the South Coast, and to be able to reach out with somebody with that kind of knowledge, it's really a lot of fun, and she was fantastic.
Yeah, and you're talking about someone who, has her own podcast with someone else from the Boston Herald. And so, this is not all new to them, and they've been doing it for so long, and they're trying to reach back to the community and give out. And it was great to give us, a half an hour worth, some of her time. And I'm sure, Paul, when it's that kind of season, you're so busy and it's kind of difficult to give some of that. Because you're involved in trying to get an interview or at training camp or on the road or whatever it is. So very special guest. I'm so happy that she was able to do it. Real thankful to have her come on and give us her thoughts on what she thinks this year about the New England Patriots. So I hope your fans really enjoy it.
I guess what she said about Brady and Belichick was not really a big surprise. She did say that Belichick is grumpy with everybody, including her. I think that's true. But Brady was always really cool with her, and I could tell that he liked her, and she kind of liked him. I think they clicked a little bit. I think you could tell that by the expressions on his face. I mean, when he came back, as a member of Tampa Bay, and he was looking at who to call on next, and they said, okay, it's going to be Karen. A big smile came on his face. Like, hey, Karen, how are you? You could tell it was genuine. It wasn't a phony thing. But that whole thing about going to his locker, spending the time, talking about her private life, her family, his family, all that stuff. Not a surprise, but you don't really think about that much. That you got to go to the locker, you got to establish kind of like a friendship. So then, and then I don't think she really ever asks. She always asks good, tough questions, but they're never like sneaky gotcha questions. They're on target, and so as an athlete, he probably appreciates that too, establishing that kind of a relationship.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think players look for that to kind of ease them during press conferences, or even when times are bad and things may not be going the way you want it, but yet someone comes in and kind of calms it down, asks nice questions, easy questions, not hammer you and like, I got to deal with this, so forth and so on. So I think that's one of the big things. And she would probably, if we put more on that, would kind of say, yeah, I think the players really enjoy a nice conversation with some good camaraderie with the media, to kind of take it at ease, especially when things are not going that well. And I think that's what Karen does, just by, seeing her demeanor even during our show.
All right, last call, not for alcohol, last call for a telephone call at 774-762-6234. We'd love to hear from you and continue to put the comments along the side here, which we really enjoyed. But, she talked a lot about Belichick, and you asked her the Belichick question about, he's getting older now. And she seems to think that he really wants to show everybody that he can win, without Brady and all that stuff. Of course, Brady's had better teams than Belichick has had, which nobody wants to talk about, which you and I have talked about. But I got to tell you, I had the good fortune of going to the New Orleans game, which the Patriots lost, but I was there with my son. It was a beautiful 70-degree day in September. We had a wonderful day otherwise. But, we were on the side of the field where Belichick is, and it's sort of like when you're at a hockey game. Like, you can say to yourself, hey, I'm just going to watch Bergeron for the next 10 minutes, because, the cameras are going to focus on where the puck is. Or you can say, I'm going to watch Sidney Crosby go around or whatever. You know what I mean? Boy, it's a lot to watch how they sneak around and they get open and they do things that, you're not really seeing on television. Well, I made the point to watch Belichick for whatever reason, because he was kind of down in front of me, and they do show him a lot on television. But there's a lot of times where he's not on. And you're right. He's walking back and forth. He's got the thing. He's talking to his assistant coaches. He's going back and forth. Sometimes during a timeout, he's over there on the side talking to a player. Sometimes he's lambasting a player. Sometimes he's talking to Mac Jones. Sometimes he's talking to an offensive lineman. He's doing all kind of stuff that you don't see. And I found that to be really, really fascinating, being able to just put all my eyeballs on, perhaps one of the greatest, if not the greatest coach that the NFL has ever seen.
Yeah, I absolutely like when, even as the game's going on, he'll leave and walk over to his offensive line, get down on one knee in a huddle with that group, and talk to them about what he saw or what they need to do better, or whatever he's saying to them. Even on the defensive side, I've seen him do that as well, whether it's the secondary, the linebackers, or the defensive line, and get down, even as the game's going on and something's really important. And he's right in there. I like that, number one. Number two, I like when he has the chart. I like when he looks at the chart, circles the chart, puts an X on it, whatever he's doing, to say, I like this, I don't like this. This is what we're going to talk about in the halftime, all that kind of stuff. To me, that's coaching, Paul, and that's what you're there for. And you're there to get the best out of this group. And when he does things like that, and I think that's what all coaches should do, not just stand on the side, fold your arms, and just watch and watch and watch. Even though I know you have specific, coordinators or specific people for those position coaches, but still, when the big guy gets in there, they're like, oh boy, he's here. What's going on? We need to step up our game or whatever it is. So I truly enjoy it. That's the way I like to see it. That's how I would do it.
Well, when I was at the game, I was thinking to myself, okay, right down here, I had a pretty good angle of Belichick. And I'm thinking, when am I going to get an opportunity to watch? Well, I'm an absolute 100% Hall of Fame coach with all this experience, with all these Super Bowls. And I actually have a chance to watch him for the next few hours, anytime I want to, so what a great opportunity that was. And it happens, like we said, in hockey, you can watch a particular player go around. Even baseball, baseball, they always show the center field camera of the pitcher and the batter, right? So I'm just kind of looking around, and you can see, like, whether it's, it was Derek Jeter when he was playing, or Bogart, you play ball, and we all know that this is what's going on, but we never see it. The outfielders are kind of standing there, and then when the pitcher goes into the pitch, they go into that little crawl and they start taking those few steps forward, and you get to see how they prepare for what's going to happen. Or even, Devers has turned out to be a great third baseman. He goes into that little crawl and he's going down and he's taking those 2 or 3 steps forward, and then it's ball one, and they say it's back up again, gets ready. We know that's what's going on, but we never get to see it unless you're at the game. So I love to look at the stuff that you wouldn't ordinarily see. And of course, Belichick, I got to tell you real quick too, Chris, because I know your mind is going like it always is, and that's what we want. But I remember one of the games I went to, Brady actually led the Patriots down. And I only saw this, I only went to like 1 or 2 Patriots games in 20 years because the prices are so ridiculous. But the one game I went to, the Patriots came down and won in the last second drive by Brady. So I was like, oh boy, that's fantastic. You know, the one game I went to, he leads them to a last minute touchdown. And actually, it was against Deshaun Watson against Houston a couple of years ago. He threw a pass to Brandon Cooks in the last 30 seconds. So anyway, I would watch him too. After the touchdown was being scored, while they're showing the replay on television, I would see him go off the field and he's getting high fives. And talk about a guy that was running the show. I mean, this guy was running the show. I was watching him the whole time. And I'm like, this guy, I was rooting for the Patriots and I wasn't so much rooting for Tampa, but what a leader this guy was. He was running the show. What he was doing on the sidelines, what he was doing, because he had Gronk there and everything else. But what a great thing to be able to put my eyeballs on Brady and Belichick while I had the good fortune to be able to do so.
Yeah, and obviously you don't see all of that when you're watching it on TV. And so you can kind of zoom in on something if you're there live. And even Tom, at the beginning of the game, before it even started, he would run out, want to be one of the first guys running out. He would run from one side all the way down to the other side, pump his fist and try to get the crowd right into it right away and so forth. As much as when he didn't do something right or something didn't go well with the offense, he'd come right off the field. He'd sit right down. McDaniels would come over, or he'd get up, go talk to the wide receivers, go talk to the running backs, talk to the offensive line. As you said, a leader that they trust and say, we're going to go back out there next time and we're going to get it done. And I see some of that from Mac Jones, and I think he will do just fine in year number 2.
Well, and just referring back to Brady just for one more second, because I think we've exhausted that topic. But, when you really, weigh the whole package that is Tom Brady, a good chunk of what makes him a great player is the off the field and the personality stuff. Like that night before the Super Bowl with Tampa Bay, he's texting these players that never won before the night before, and he's telling them, hey, you know what's going to happen tomorrow? You're going to win the Super Bowl. And the guy's like, Tom Brady's telling me, Paul Santos, who's a running back, we're going to win the Super Bowl. Yeah. If he believes it, I'm going to believe it. Like all that kind of stuff that makes him a leader. The stuff off the field, that sort of personal stuff, that stuff that he would do to lead the team, that was just as good as Mr. Clutch on the field. You know what I mean? Which I really wasn't thinking about until sort of the tail end of his career.
Yeah, it becomes a group. You become a family, that kind of thing. You take the highs, you take the lows, and he's there for those guys as much as hopefully those guys were there for him. And you get some great repertoire between you and your receivers, you and your backs. You know what? I'm sure he reached out to James White, who just retired, and said, James, thank you for what you've done. Mm-hmm. Thank you for your Super Bowl wins and your contribution to New England Patriots. Wouldn't surprise me in the least. He would do something like that.
All right. So in our closing moments here, we keep asking everybody what they think is going to happen. And we got some contributions about what they think is going to happen. I got to tell you, I have no idea. I had somebody tell me the other day in court, one of the probation officers that I'm friendly with, he goes 5-12. They're going to go 5-12. I'm like, good God, that's a pretty pessimistic approach. Then we got Mark Silvio over here from Chicago saying they're going to go whatever he said. I forget exactly 10-7.
It was the same thing.
Make the playoffs. So, and then we got Karen down the middle around the 500, which is what the over under is. I don't know. I probably thinking somewhere in the middle there. They might steal a game. A couple of those. They're not going to lose every single game to every single good team. I imagine they're going to steal a few of those. So, Karen's probably in the ballpark. What do you think?
Well, for me, Paul, I think it's too early to tell. I got to see a little bit more. I got to see some live, first string starters and see what I get out of that. I can't tell right now just from, what I'm hearing in training camp and even the preseason, because right now, Mac didn't play and there was a lot of second and third stringers that they're trying to develop and figure out if they're going to stay on this team, things like that. So I'm still worried yet. I can't really give a prediction out there until I start seeing the first unit and what they really look like. And so as it gets closer, I'll kind of come out then and say, hey, this is what I think is going to happen with them.
All right. And while we have a moment here in the closing seconds, we would like to take the opportunity to thank our sponsors, and that is Scotty's Pub, 202 Pleasant Street in Fall River, Citywide Glass, with 3 locations to serve you in Dartmouth, Fall River, and Taunton. Lakeville Athletic Club, 325 Bedford Street in Lakeville, where you can pursue tennis, pickleball, and a whole lot more. And our good friend, former New Bedford High Whaler quarterback and a member of that baseball team that won the state championship at Fenway Park, whose father is a great guy still coaching in New Bedford High School, John Seed, attorney at law, 156 8th Street in New Bedford. And again, we want to thank Chris for getting Karen to come on the show. Karen, I think she said I pronounced it correctly, but maybe I didn't. She was being kind. Guregian from the Boaston Herald for being an outstanding guest. We really had a lot of fun picking her mind. She's a Patriot insider. So good score there, partner.
I appreciate it, Paul. And hopefully we can get some more guests down the line like we normally do. We'll talk about it and see if someone else is out there that we haven't had, or maybe get someone back that we've had before who's been such a great guest. So stick around for that, fans. And hopefully I'll have something else for you very shortly.
All right. And real quick, I'm going to be on the radio if you're watching this live.
Yes.
You're watching it playback later. But if you're watching it live, I'm going to be on WBSM Radio in New Bedford today between 1 and 4. We're going to start with an interview with a fisherman who's going to explain how that fishing boat plowed into the cruise ship that I was on when I was on my way to Bermuda. And then tonight at 11:35, my other show, which is the comedy variety show that we do with Chops Turner, where we highlight local talent and stuff like that. We're going to make a debut on Channel 6 in Providence at 11:35. Nice. So watch the 11 o'clock news on Channel 6, and then we'll roll right in. We'll roll right into the Paul Santos live show. So a lot of fun stuff happening here with Santos on Sports and some of those other projects as well. See, now that the kids are grown and gone, I got time to pursue all.
Awesome. I listen, I heard you were singing the other day. That's how happy you were over at the feast. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. In fact, if you haven't seen the clip, just go to my Facebook page, Paul J. Santos, and scroll back, and there's actually a clip up there. I got so many comments about that stuff, the whole Frank Sinatra gig, you know. So, wow. hey, again, absolutely true. We're just trying to have some fun in the, this is a ball game here. I think I'm probably in the 7th inning, something like that. So I want to have a strong close. I want to have a strong finish. The middle relief, it started out good. The middle relief was a little shaky, but I want to have a good close at the end anyway. Hey, Chris, awesome. That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Paul. And fans out there, enjoy it. And we'll see you obviously next week.
All right. For my partner, Chris Santos, I'm Paul Santos for Santos on Sports. We'll talk to you again next week, and be safe. Talk to you.